Every year, Charlotte Winters honored the same quiet tradition, spending Thanksgiving alone. While her husband Mason went back to his family, it had always been their agreement. He'd made it clear from the start: no switching homes, no joining families, just routine. But this year, something tugged at her heart. After decades of sacrificing holidays for the sake of peace, she finally asked if they could spend Thanksgiving together, at home. Mason frowned, almost offended. "Don't you remember the deal? We've always kept things separate," he snapped. Their two grown children, Ethan and Lily, quickly chimed in, echoing their father's logic. "Nobody does traditional Thanksgivings anymore, Mom. Let it go." Charlotte smiled weakly and nodded, but inside, her spirit cracked. She had already purchased a train ticket to Mason's hometown. There was a question that had haunted her for years. What exactly does he do every Thanksgiving? What she discovered that day didn't just answer that question. It shattered every illusion she'd ever held about her marriage. 30 years of loyalty, 30 Thanksgivings spent alone. And suddenly it all made sense. Charlotte had rehearsed it all in her mind. If Mason saw her show up, maybe he'd look surprised. Maybe even guilty. Maybe, if she were lucky, he'd break into a nervous explanation. But none of that happened. Instead, when she stepped off the train in Mason's hometown, what she saw left her breathless for entirely different reasons. There, in the town square, under strings of golden lights and the warm glow of a vintage lamp post, stood Mason, her husband of 30 years, peeling tangerines and smiling gently at another woman. She knew that woman, Alicia Monroe, his first love, the one Charlotte had always heard about in hushed tones and vague memories. The one who'd moved away right before Mason and Charlotte got engaged. But there she was, right next to him, with the ease and familiarity of someone who'd never left. A young couple, a boy and girl, set off fireworks in the background, laughing together as Alicia leaned into Mason, holding a glass of wine. A passerby filmed the moment, posting it to social media with a caption that read, "Or another Thanksgiving, another 30 years of love. May we all find someone to grow old with like this." The comments flooded in. "She doesn't look 60 at all. That's real love, so pure." Relationship goals. May they have another 30 years together. Charlotte's hand trembled as she stared at her phone screen. The man in that video, the man holding Alicia like she was a part of him, was Mason. The man she had ironed a shirt for just 2 nights ago, the shirt he was wearing in the video. The children in the background, their son Ethan and daughter Lily. Everything made sense now. Every Thanksgiving she'd spent alone, every scarf she'd knit him, every plum blossom he said he embroidered for. Tradition. None of it was for her. The plane tickets she once found and believed were meant for a surprise getaway were always for them. For 30 years, her family had built a second life around her absence. A life where she didn't exist. And the worst part, her children had been in on it too. She remembered the strange silences when she asked about Thanksgiving plans, the tight smiles, the awkward diversions. Her heart sank as she realized the extent of the betrayal. This wasn't just about Mason. This was about how everyone around her, everyone she loved, had decided she wasn't worth the truth. A wave of nausea rolled over her. She stepped back from the platform, slumping onto a bench, the cold seeping through her coat. For 30 Thanksgivings, she had cooked alone, smiled through tears, and convinced herself it was fine. But not this time. This time, she knew exactly where she stood. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't going to let it go. Charlotte didn't cry, not at first. Instead, she sat in silence on that wooden bench, surrounded by laughing strangers and glowing holiday lights, yet feeling like the loneliest woman on earth. The cold wind brushed past her face, but it was nothing compared to the chill that had rooted itself inside her. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe Alicia had gone through a rough time. Maybe Mason was just keeping a promise. But even as those thoughts passed, her phone vibrated. A notification from Alicia Monroe's public profile. A video, a warm, charming clip showing Alicia holding a wine glass as Mason handed her peeled tangerines. Ethan and Lily in the background lighting sparklers. Captioned, Or another Thanksgiving. Another memory. May we keep this tradition alive forever. Then came the comments. So beautiful. I wish my parents were this close. This is real family. You're glowing. Alicia. What's your skincare secret? And then Alicia's reply. He's just an old friend. But our families are close. It's been 30 Thanksgivings now. Charlotte's breath hitched. Our families. So it wasn't just Mason. Her children were part of it. Her children. The very ones who once needed her for every scraped knee, every sleepless night. Had helped him keep this lie going. Charlotte clenched her jaw, her fingers trembled. She walked to the nearest ticket counter. Ma'am, the trains back to San Diego are sold out. The attendant said, looking apologetic. She blinked. Oh. She murmured. Never mind. As she stepped outside, the cold sliced through her coat. The world spun a little. Her chest tightened, her legs gave way. And everything went dark. She woke in a sterile hospital room, the scent of antiseptic thick in the air. Ethan stood at the foot of her bed, arms crossed, face taut. Lily sat beside him, nervously scrolling her phone. You scared us, Ethan said flatly. We thought you'd gone back to San Diego. Who's going to take care of Bear? Bear. The family dog, that was his concern. Lily glanced up. Mom, come on. It's Thanksgiving. You're being dramatic. Charlotte stared at her children. The two people she had raised. The two people who were now looking at her like she was the problem. They had lied, every year. Covered for their father. Spent their holidays with him, and Alicia while she sat alone making pumpkin pie no one would eat. And now, she was the inconvenience. Charlotte took a deep breath. So the trips to Denver, the souvenirs from New Orleans, those were all lies, weren't they? The siblings froze. Mom, that silhouette in the video, it could be anyone, Ethan said weakly. Charlotte reached for her phone and held up the video again. This is you. Both of you. Behind Alicia and your father. Fireworks in hand. Laughing. The room went silent. No one offered an apology, not even a single tear. Just quiet, suffocating shame. The silence in the hospital room stretched like a rubber band, pulled so tight it was bound to snap. Ethan glanced at Lily, as if begging her to speak. Lily just fidgeted with the strap of her purse, refusing to meet Charlotte's gaze. Charlotte's voice was steady, but it held an undercurrent of steel. You've both known for years, haven't you? Still no answer. I sat alone every Thanksgiving while you went off to play Happy Family with Dad and Alicia, and not once did either of you think I might notice. That I might feel something. Ethan finally spoke, his tone defensive. Mom, come on. We didn't mean anything by it. It's not like you ever really liked Thanksgiving. You always seemed tired, stressed. We just didn't want drama. Drama? Charlotte echoed, almost laughing. So this betrayal isn't drama? Lily finally looked up. Mom, please. You're being a little intense. Everyone's older now. Traditions change. You're making it too personal. Charlotte's heart cracked all over again. She had raised these children with love. With devotion. She had kissed fevers away. Stayed up on Christmas Eve sewing costumes for school plays. Worked overtime to buy them college textbooks, while their father worked late. And now, they stood here, brushing off 30 years of lies like spilled milk. She slowly sat up, her body stiff from the hospital bed. Get out, she said, voice low. What? Ethan blinked. Get out. You're being ridiculous. Get out of my room. They hesitated, stunned by her tone. Then Ethan muttered something under his breath and led Lily out. Charlotte was finally alone again. But this time, the solitude wasn't hollow. It was quiet. It was clean. It was hers. Later that evening, the door opened again. This time, it was Mason. He walked in like a man on trial, holding a plastic container and a store-bought salad. I brought dinner, he said, setting it down with exaggerated care. Kale, your favorite. Charlotte stared at the container. Kale. The one leafy green she hated most. She slowly unscrewed the lid. On the edge of the box, a smudge of deep red lipstick. It wasn't hers. She looked up. Did Alicia pack this? Mason froze. Then tried to recover. She helped. Charlotte gave a short laugh. Low, bitter. You spent 30 years making me feel invisible. And now you bring me leftovers, with her lipstick on the edge. Mason's shoulders sagged. You don't understand. Alicia's had a hard life. I promised her family I'd always be there. So you made a vow to her. And a marriage to me. Charlotte said, her voice cold. But only one of those did you keep. He reached for her hand. She pulled it away. You had your 30 Thanksgivings, Mason, she said. But this year is mine. She rose, unplugged her Eve, and walked out of the hospital. The air outside was sharp and alive. And for the first time in years, so was she. Charlotte didn't look back as the hospital doors slid shut behind her. She didn't have a plan, no luggage, no coat. Just a purse, a hospital bracelet, and a pounding heart. But she was finally free. She walked for blocks through the cold, under city lights that shimmered like 1,000 tiny possibilities. Her feet ached. Her cheeks stung from the wind. But she felt something she hadn't felt in decades alive. The next morning, she checked into a modest inn by the bay. The woman at the front desk looked concerned at the sight of her disheveled clothes and thin cardigan. Charlotte just smiled. Rough night. In her room, she curled up by the window and watched the waves crashing against the rocks. She sipped tea, read a novel she never had time for, and listened to nothing but the soft hum of seagulls and distant traffic. No one was calling her name. No one was demanding dinner. No one was lying. It was heaven. By the third day, she went to the local mall. At first, she wandered aimlessly through stores, feeling out of place amid mannequins dressed in bright trends. But then, on a whim, she walked into a boutique. A red dress on a mannequin caught her eye. Vibrant, bold, not something she'd ever dare wear before. She hesitated, then reached out to feel the fabric. Would you like to try it on? The salesgirl asked warmly. Charlotte blinked. Actually, yes. I would. Inside the fitting room, she slipped into the dress. It hugged her frame in all the right places. She turned to the mirror, bracing herself for disappointment. Instead, what stared back was a woman she barely recognized. Shoulders back, eyes clear, posture tall. She didn't see a housewife. She saw Charlotte Winters. She bought the dress, and the shoes, and the lipstick the girl recommended. The next stop was the travel agency. She booked a one-way flight, to anywhere. 2 days later, she was on a plane. Her phone was on airplane mode, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. No texts, no guilt, no passive-aggressive calls from Mason. For the first time, the silence was comforting. She began filming bits of her travels. Sunrises over canyons, late-night markets in small towns, kind strangers offering her food. Slowly, she learned how to edit, upload, share. She didn't care about going viral. But to her surprise, people watched. They left comments like, "You inspire me, Charlotte. I hope my mom finds this courage someday. Who says life ends at 60? Each message stitched a little more strength into the fabric of her healing. The world hadn't ended when she left her marriage. In fact, it had only just begun. Charlotte's travel blog began as nothing more than a digital scrapbook. A way to keep track of where she'd been, what she'd eaten, and the things she never had time for before. But it didn't stay small for long. Within weeks, her channel began gaining traction. Viewers, mostly women her age, flooded in, drawn to her candid storytelling and calm presence. She wasn't flashy. She didn't pretend to be wise or glamorous. She was just honest. In one video, she sat on a balcony overlooking a beach, sipping tea. "I used to think quiet meant being forgotten," she said to the camera. "No, I know. It means peace." The comments poured in. "You say what I've always felt but couldn't explain. Thank you for showing me it's not too late to start over." Charlotte was stunned. For so long, her voice had only echoed off the walls of her own home. Now it was being heard across the world. She started saying yes to things she used to avoid. Sunset hikes, open mic nights, even salsa dancing in Santa Fe. She laughed more, slept better, wore lipstick again, not for anyone else, just for her. And then, one afternoon, her phone rang. The caller had said, "Mason." She let it go to voicemail. Then another call. Then a text. "I need your help. I can't figure out how to turn on the washing machine." Another message. "Do you know where the sugar is? Everything tastes off without you here." Charlotte read them with a blank expression. He wasn't missing her. He was missing the service. Later that night, Ethan called. "Dad signed the papers," he said. "But do you really have to do this? What about the family?" Charlotte responded with a soft but firm voice. "Then, a family isn't just who you're born into. It's the people who don't lie to you. Who show up for you. I did that for 30 years. I'm not doing it anymore." She hung up and blocked the number. The next morning, she walked into a community center in San Diego where she'd been invited to speak. A small crowd of women her age sat in the front row, some clutching notepads, others wiping their eyes before she even spoke. Her presentation was titled, "How to Stop Disappearing in Your Own Life." Afterward, women lined up just to hug her. "Thank you," one whispered, "for proving it's not too late." Charlotte left the event with a gift basket, a new friend, and a spring in her step. Outside, the sky was gold with late afternoon light. She tilted her head back, smiled, and took a deep breath. The world felt wide, open, and for the first time, she didn't just feel seen. She felt alive. It wasn't until the day she returned to San Diego to pick up her official divorce certificate that Charlotte truly felt it. The final door closing. She stepped out of the courthouse wearing a navy blue pantsuit. Her chin lifted, posture steady. The wind tousled her chestnut hair, freshly trimmed just the week before. Outside, she spotted Mason sitting on a bench under the shade of a jacaranda tree. His hands were folded over his knees, his shirt wrinkled, his shoes scuffed. He looked up as she passed, his eyes lingering on her. "You look different," he said softly. Charlotte paused. "I am different," he smiled faintly. "You've lost weight." She raised an eyebrow. "That's what happens when you stop carrying everyone else's burdens." Mason tried one last time. "If I cut off Alicia completely? If I promised to spend every holiday with you? Would you give me another chance?" Charlotte didn't blink. "You failed me when you were 30. You failed me at 60. That kind of track record isn't love. It's a habit. And I've finally broken it." She turned and walked away, not in anger, just peace. 2 months later, she found herself standing before a crowd of over 300 women at a local women's retreat. She had been invited to speak not as a divorcee, not as a victim, but as a leader. As someone who had clawed her way back from silence. "I'm not here to tell you to leave your marriages," she said that day, microphone in hand. "I'm here to tell you to find yourself again. Whether that means staying, leaving, or reinventing your whole world. Make sure you're in it." Thunderous applause followed. In the months that came after, Charlotte kept moving, from Oregon to Maine, from sleepy fishing towns to sun-drenched vineyards. She filmed sunsets, documented markets, and shared her healing in snippets of soft narration. She found friends in unexpected places. One, a retired firefighter who taught her how to fish. Another, a 72-year-old salsa instructor named Marisol who insisted Charlotte join her weekly dance nights. And yes, she danced. Not because anyone asked her to, but because her body had waited decades to feel joy again. Occasionally, she would hear rumors. Mason had married Alicia. The children tried to play happy family, but the magic faded fast. Alicia's temperament clashed with theirs, and what once seemed like a picture-perfect union quickly became a parade of public arguments and whispered gossip. Charlotte didn't care. She never looked at their photos. Never asked about the drama. She had her peace. Her mornings were filled with fresh coffee, her evenings with moonlight walks, and her days with people who didn't know her past, but respected her presence. One afternoon, while walking through a quiet vineyard in Sonoma, someone asked, "Do you miss him?" Charlotte laughed, light and airy. "No," she said. "But I missed me, and now I've got her back." Charlotte's story is not just about betrayal, it's about rebirth. For 30 years, she believed love meant sacrifice. That being a good wife and mother meant putting everyone else first, even at the cost of her own identity. But the truth is, when love demands your silence, your pain, and your invisibility, it's no longer love. It's servitude. The moment Charlotte stopped chasing approval was the moment she finally met herself. The woman who was always there, waiting to be seen, Her journey teaches us that it's never too late to start again. No matter your age. No matter how long you've stayed. You are allowed to say, enough. You're allowed to leave the table when respect is no longer being served. You don't need anyone's permission to reclaim your peace. Charlotte didn't lose everything. She found something priceless herself.